Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable.
The digital age is staring at us in the face from the not-so-distant future. We already see countless instances of digital technology emerging and transforming our everyday lives. A simple example of cell phones being equipped with voice recognition software are able to take photographs and send them wirelessly across the globe at the blink of an eye. When information like this is captured and transmitted into a digital format, possibilities for that data become endless. Digital information, being far more reliable and malleable, can be processed, changed, or even duplicated to meet an individual's demand. However, none of this will be possible if machines don't talk to one another. Interoperability being a key driver for the technological age, there needs to be a global push for a unified digital ecosystem to accelerate our journey into the digital age.
Hello and welcome to the Digital Code, Scripting the Future of IT. This special two-part conversation with eminent stakeholders deep dives into the standardization of the digital ecosystem. Last time we talked about the role that India can play in creating standards for the global IT industry. Today we'll talk about developing a pool of human capital for creating these global IT standards, achieving interoperability between technologies and devices, as well as addressing growing security and privacy concerns using standards. To throw light on all of these and more, I'm joined by a very eminent panel of experts at our Noida studios. Vikas Arora, Chief Transformation Officer, IBM India and South Asia. Jagdish Mitra, Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer, Tech Mahindra. Mrityunjay Kapoor, Partner and Head of Technology, Media and Telecom at KPMG India. Reena Garg, Head of Electronics and IT Department at the Bureau of Indian Standards. And Jiten Jain, CEO of Voyager Infosec. Mrityunjay, we're in an age where all of us are operating on multiple devices. How can standards ensure smoother communication between devices, and what are the biggest challenges in achieving this smooth communication?
So of course all these devices are from different manufacturers, have different operating systems. So standards for sure can create that connect in terms of making sure that the data transfer that is happening between devices is under a set protocol. Also, more importantly, it's secure. I think the personally identifiable information, the entire identity management of a device is very, very critical, and that can only be achieved if we have defined standards which enable these systems or these devices to really speak some sort of a common language.
Right.
I mean, they don't need to speak the same language, but has to be some common language.
Jagdish, standards are more often than not associated with product quality. But as far as service delivery is concerned, especially in the IT sector, how do standards impact service delivery?
It impacts significantly because you define standard operating processes, because then you know that a customer, because at the end of the day in an IT organization, you are doing things which are for a business which is ultimately delivering a service to an end customer.
Right.
So in the new world, you're constantly defining software and services that the end customer is going to consume. So you and me. If you don't have standards, then you don't know what to expect out of those standard operating processes and procedures. So software services that we deliver and the operations that we run with have constantly got to be managed within in a bucket of standards.
Right.
That's the only way you can expect predictability of service.
BIS, of course, is the apex body in India as far as standards are concerned, Reena. So give us a sense of how BIS is instrumental in influencing standards for the IT sector globally, and what are you doing to improve the whole culture of participation in standards creation within the country?
Actually, the culture of participation is needs to be improved a lot. I agree with you totally that this culture in our country, the standards, the thinking that the standard, the need for giving time, effort and money to the standard formulation process is at the back end at present. But now, like as you have said, that the standards can only be the solution for all these kinds of problems which we are facing, the interoperability, the integration of the various technologies. So, we need to come forward, the industry need to come forward, the regulators need to come forward, the academia needs to come forward to put forward their efforts in consolidating, and BIS will give them a platform. BIS because deals with all these technical committees at international level, and we are the part of international standard setting process through BIS technical committees.
Right.
So, all the participants, all the stakeholders, they need to come through BIS to participate in all these standard setting.
Vikas, you operate in various global markets. Of course, IBM is present across the world. How different is our approach to standards from that of developed nations and as compared to other emerging nations, maybe China in particular?
Fundamentally, the approach is the same, and the more we've been here discussing this topic, it is clear that it is really a very coordinated approach. I think where we stand sort of differentiated here is in the ability for us to get a diverse set of ecosystems and use cases. I think that way, the whole context of India provides us with that opportunity. Now, have we effectively mapped it today? Have we effectively brought that to the fore? I think there's potentially a question mark there. So, I wouldn't say there's a difference, but I think there is definitely a latent opportunity to tap into the ecosystem that we present as a country.
Along with that opportunity, there are threats as well. There is the huge threat of privacy, of data invasion. Jiten, how future ready are we in terms of compliance? How future ready is our entire standards ecosystem? Is it evolving at the pace at which technologies are evolving?
I don't think the ecosystem is evolving. What is evolving are the some structures on some pillars of ecosystem, and you can't build a pyramid on one single wall. You have to build all 4 walls together. So you look at the problem. Look at the organizations like ITU. They are still in this old age hangover of thinking the world is in this fixed line telephony era where they are focusing on the quality of interoperability communication, which will obviously solve the problem of business and cross device communication. But I don't think we have realized the gravity of threat when we look at the standardization for security, when we look at the need of standardization for decision making, especially when in the age of AI. And now what is happening is that everybody is going in for automation, putting all sort of sensors and devices everywhere without standardization. And what is happening is that now we are having data and money graph for us everywhere. It's a golden age for hackers.
So, given all of those threats, Mrityunjay, how would you chart the road forward as far as security concerns are concerned? What should be the topmost agenda, especially with respect to standard setting?
I'm taken aback with the gloomy picture of security threats, but I think the security starts with awareness, and the first element is that a lot of the children, the younger generation is actually growing up in a digital age with multiple devices, access to multiple technologies, and I think that awareness is a starting point in terms of how do we make the entire sort of generation aware, and including all sort of tech enabled citizens in any country. The second, of course, is standardization, and standardization can provide you a framework, but it's also important to say how do you keep ahead of any and every exploitation that happens, and that's investment into R&D, investment into sort of SOCs, investment into training and development on a continuous basis. So, standards will play a very important part, but I think it has to be more than standards which is going to secure us or our future generations in this new age of technology.
Right. Because as far as standard setting for cloud is concerned globally, where does India stand, and what should be the roadmap ahead for India to participate more in global standard setting as far as cloud is concerned?
See, let's understand, as we all know, cloud is essentially an underlying infrastructure. What runs on top of cloud is actually going to be the one that is going to have the disruption potential or the benefits that we are talking about here. Now, from an India context, like I was saying earlier, we have the largest or among the largest developer population. Now, developers today are free to choose whichever technology they want to deploy for whatever they're building, and it is those kind of applications that are going to make AI real, IoT real, blockchain real. But when developers actually do and build applications, they need to rely on a certain standard that the cloud infrastructures provide today.
Right.
So they can actually feel free to deploy whatever they're building without having to think about, hey, I'm building it to deploy here versus there. And I think that is really where, and given the kind of opportunity that India presents from a developer population point of view, I think having standards is just going to create or give an impetus to innovation, and that is actually going to make some of these technologies more real than they are today.
Right. And Jagdish, from an IT perspective, what are the pain points that you think governing bodies like the BIS should be looking at addressing and looking at bringing out in global conferences perhaps, so that maybe adoption of cloud and other emerging technologies is much faster, especially by smaller businesses in India?
2-3 things that I think the BIS can do for us. One is obviously work, as Reena said, about working with the industry to create a standard platform where people can share their views and opinions and how it can apply to it. Second is, I think, take it out to the colleges and universities to enable to bring in that culture of following a certain standard as you start to become employable and start to do, because today's world you don't need to graduate to become employable. You can create solutions, you can create apps, you can create a whole lot of innovation while you are in a college or a university or wherever.
Right.
Third, I think, is make sure that this is applicable to India. I don't think it is more about Indian standards. It's more about, are we adopting standards that are applicable to India, or are we force fitting them from outside? If it is adopting standards which are applicable to India, no need to
Then
change.
no
You need to just raise the awareness and make sure, because we are ultimately in the connected world, we are delivering an experience which is global.
Correct.
We have to look at not just India as the market, but the whole global market where we are driving solutions.
All right. Okay, so on that note, we are going to head into a very short break right now, but stay with us as this exciting conversation continues on the other side, right here on the Digital Code, Scripting the Future of IT. Welcome back to the Digital Code, Scripting the Future of IT. Collaboration is key to the success of any idea, and standardization of the digital ecosystem is really no exception. It requires collaboration of all kinds, collaboration between the public and private sectors, between nations, and collaboration within organizations. Talking of collaboration, at IBM, how collaboratively do you work with standards bodies as well as developer communities to ensure that interoperability standards are freely available and freely implementable?
I think IBM has always been a very strong proponent of building standards and working collaboratively. We've worked historically in many, large projects and build, and especially on open source. And it's very important to stick to a few basics when you're talking about, participating and collaborating here. Is there a thriving ecosystem behind it? Is there a transparent process? And most importantly, is there open governance around, how these communities are building and deploying or creating standards? And you would see historically, wherever these principles have been adhered to, those communities and those bodies have actually become bigger, and those technologies have become pervasive.
Reena, on an international level, how collaboratively does BIS work with other emerging superpowers, perhaps China or other emerging markets? How collaboratively do you work with them, and are we all on the same page as far as global standard setting is concerned?
Yes, we are. So, like when we formulate the standards, international standards, along with all the members, the viewpoints of all the countries are taken into account, and at that point of time, like we can raise our concern, our issues which should be dealt with and incorporated in the standards. So, we are in a way collaborating with all these kind of countries and national bodies who are participating in international standard setting process.
What are the biggest challenges that need to be addressed to ensure that our current workforce is future ready?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is for the current workforce to realize that they will not be relevant if they don't change. I think. Are
you investing enough to help them change?
Yeah, absolutely. And we are trying to change the whole model. We are disrupting internally first before we go and tell the world how we will disrupt them. And the internal disruption is that we want to make sure that people first recognize there is value in changing. You can't run the old school model of saying, come to class because the boss has said or the teacher has said, and now you'll follow course number 1 to 10 from 9 to 5. That's not the world anymore. The world has to recognize that people who come to class have to see there is value in them, and it's our job as a team or as the leadership or management, whatever terminology you want to call it, is to ensure that we make them aware that without the change, they are no longer relevant, or we are no longer relevant as organizations in the future. So standardization for us, it becomes embedded in terms of security development into software, into standards realization, and we do software development, and we create a whole library of learning from there.
All right. And on the security front, Jiten, what's the sort of gap that we have as far as workforce is concerned, and how would you chart the way forward?
I think there is a fundamental problem with standardizations of AI and cloud, especially AI. I think in future, the primary driver of AI is going to be the defense and military, and there is going to be a lot of huge wheel of secrecy around what is going on and what sort of, we have been talking about AI-based robot, offensive robots who can do all sort of, things. We have had trials from Russia where an offensive robot was used to secure an entire facility against a, battalion of 1,000, armed guards.
Right.
So you look at the destructive power and potential, and then in such scenario, if you look at business sense, a very simple concept of an artificial chatbot, which is used by many websites for travel bookings and all those things. Now the issue is that we have to have some sort of law enforcement consults also been taken care in standardization process. For example, if you go to a travel booking website and while you're travel booking a ticket, and suppose something goes wrong, I think you should know that whether you were talking to an individual or a bot. I think most of the websites are not willing to reveal whether the customer is talking to a bot or a human, just because they want to give this flavor of how
that
good our
personal
customer
touch.
care, personal touch is there. So I think when it comes to AI, more than standards, more has to be about law enforcement security and what we don't have to do despite of what is possible and what can be taken care of. But we have to draw certain lines which we as humans should not cross. That's my suggestion.
Right. Mrityunjay, would you like to add to that? How much regulation do we really need to ensure that we meet minimum standards and we don't really misuse technology like Jiten was just telling us?
I think we are anyways an over-regulated country, and it's all about implementation of those regulations. Now I completely understand the fact that you've got AI doing various activities, for example prescribing medicine or taking on a lawyer's work. I think all of those have to be dovetailed into the regulations, and I think a large framework for it exists. And it's how we implement it or how we make sure that all of this comes under the ambit of regulations. So I would say that more than regulation, it has to be ethics, it has to be governance, how any of these new technologies impact us as humans and also have an impact on an organization and its employees. So that combined with the regulatory framework is how this will go forward.
All right. Okay, so we are running short of time. So let me close by asking each one of you for that one step that Indian IT stakeholders need to take immediately that can lead to better standardization of the whole digital ecosystem. And we are going to keep this really short, 30 seconds each.
What we need here is, forums like these where we are actually bringing, I think, the public imagination around, just like a topic in AI, just caused different, misinterpretations, misconceptions. I think it's important to clarify and then define the right problem statement that we're looking to solve here.
All right. Jagdish?
Data and AI. I think that's got to be the real place where the world is going to change. It's only going to be data, whether it's IoT or networks. This is providing data, and the next level on top of it is what you make out of it. Right. And that's going to be AI and customer experience. So to me, if you get regulation or guidelines around how to do it, that's good enough.
Mrityunjay?
So devices, I think if we can take the lead in setting standards for devices and manufacturing, it will really take us into the next age of technology.
Okay, Reena?
So the infrastructure and the mechanism are there. Like what is needed is that we have to change our mindset, to review our priorities, to put in more efforts, to put in manpower and to put in money in this kind of activity, and to make India a successful economy, and commitment has to be from the top level.
All right. Jiten?
There is a huge potential for using these technologies, AI, IoT, and all sort of sensors. But we must, in over-regulation obviously will be a problem, but the absence of regulation will be an even bigger problem.
Right.
So we must have some sort of interim arrangement. It may be in the form of guidelines. It may be in the form, some sort of regulation which can be then, decided flexibility in cases by a committee in case there is a problem. And we must ensure that when we talk about sensors, who can use it, how much of the data can be retained, and in case of there is a data breach or leakage, who is held responsible.
Okay, thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, Reena, for joining us on the show today. We had a wonderful time with all those insights. With that, it's a wrap on this special two-part conversation on standardizing the digital ecosystem. Hope you enjoyed those valuable insights that will surely help script the future of IT. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye.